Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Tropics Talk. Of course, still tracking Grace and Henri, so let's get right to it here this morning. We look out across the Atlantic Basin. Henri swirling off to the east of the Carolinas now. Grace is inland over Mexico, and then still that wave the Hurricane Center has pegged a low development chance in the far eastern tropical Atlantic. Like I said yesterday, don't worry about that. It's already gaining latitude. The chances for it to come together pretty low. Not much of a model signal anyway. But even if something were to come together, something gaining latitude that early in the game, it's going to stay in the open waters of the Atlantic. Not going to be any type of issue for the United States or the Caribbean. So let's begin by talking about Grace, which, if you haven't checked in since yesterday morning, quite a day Grace had. In fact, let me dig into the satellite presentation here on Grace. Actually ramped all the way up to Category 3 intensity. Became the first major hurricane of 2021. I want to go back through the past 24 hours. You can see exactly what happened here. A process called rapid intensification. So this was back at 10:30 yesterday morning, just as I was posting my last Tropics Talk, sort of looking like a shrimp on the satellite presentation there. But a classic sign of an intensifying storm. The waters were very warm here in the Bay of Campeche in the mid and upper 80s. The wind shear was very, very low. Perfect conditions for this to ramp up, and ramp up it did. See, advancing that forward already, signs of an eye trying to clear out. This was by about 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Filled back in, but the convection just kept popping. You can see that with thunderstorm activity. Two separate rotating hot towers on either side of the center. Again, a classic sign. You can actually make out in this was by 5 o'clock yesterday, you can sort of make out the hurricane symbol in there, that classic S-band, with the intensification continuing, and that continued all the way up to landfall. There you go, clearing out the eye just before moving on shore in Veracruz. You can zoom in closer and take off the telestration. There's your cleared out eye right at landfall. 125 mile per hour winds. Category 3 hurricane. The first major hurricane making landfall in North America, in Mexico, since 2007, when Dean struck on the same date in the Yucatan. Now, of course, you go from your peak intensity just at landfall, gets away from the warm waters, gets away from its fuel, and Grace quickly weakening. You see those bright reds giving way to more yellows. The cloud tops are warming. The convection is collapsing. A whole lot of mountains out here in central Mexico towards Mexico City. This will, in all likelihood, fall apart. Although something to watch for with Grace going forward, some models suggest perhaps some semblance of that low-level swirl, that low-level center, hold together through the mountains and moves into the Pacific. And then we get regeneration of this in the warm waters of the eastern Pacific. The question would be, does the Hurricane Center determine that it falls apart entirely and then something new comes together, or does it maintain that core? Because if it does, it would hold the name Grace. If not, it would take a new name in the Pacific. So again, something to watch about. There's still going to be a lot of rain, flooding, mudslides in the mountains of Mexico here today, but at least the wind threat quickly dying down as Grace weakens going forward today. We'll switch gears and look at Henri. Still a tropical storm as the latest update. Not looking terribly healthy on the satellite presentation. In fact, taking on more of a subtropical look, I would say. That's not surprising as you consider the environment that Henri is within right now. So we talked about this yesterday, and I'm going to dive in so I can telestrate for you too. We talked about this yesterday in that what is steering Henri is an upper level low, and that's not tough to make out. It's that swirling area there in parts of the Ohio Valley and the Mid-Atlantic, right there over West Virginia and Virginia, and it's in the center of a dip in the jet stream, a trough. All right, so we have our trough digging south. We have our low centered right about there, and that's what's giving Henri more of a northeasterly kick here this morning. It's moving to the north-northeast right now. It's also bringing in, I think, a little bit of southwesterly wind shear. We'll take a closer look at the visible satellite, and you can sort of see that the convection has pushed a little bit of the center. Not the ideal setup like you saw, say, with Grace last night, with no wind shear whatsoever, vertically stacked, cleared out its eye. It was able to become a major hurricane. Still strengthening likely, but at least at this point in time, the dry air on the south side of that upper low and that wind shear still keeping it at tropical storm strength. But of note, this entire area on the eastern side of that trough, you have upper level divergence going on. In college, our professors taught us to think about, an ice skater going through one of their spins. They bring their arms together, and you're going to spin more quickly, and then you spread your arms out and you slow down. Well, as air parcels are going down around this trough, on the base of the trough, they enter it, and it's like the ice skater bringing their arms in, and the spin begins to increase much more quickly. But then as they exit the trough, as they begin to lift to the north and east, now it's that sort of spreading of the arms and the spin slowing down. That leads to upper level divergence, the upper levels of the atmosphere. So the area I have circled is an area where air is spreading apart in the upper levels. That means there's air rising and falling pressures at the surface. So Henri is entering an area where, regardless of the tropical sort of formation here, lowering surface pressures would be expected. So no matter what, I think we can expect the pressure to drop, the winds to come up with Henri. The question is, does that wind shear continue, and how much strengthening do we see? When you look at the visible satellite presentation, again, the fringes of the center being exposed a little bit, but it's still looking pretty healthy. There's still that central dense overcast. You can see the storms pop in on the visible satellite presentation. It just begins to move to the north. I suspect we're going to see some filling in of that convection where that dry air has sort of eroded the western edge of it through the day here today, as it is over some very warm waters right now. It's right over what's called the Gulf Stream. We talked about it yesterday. In and around Cape Hatteras, this area of deep orange, that's the Gulf Stream. Warm waters that originate in the Florida Straits, the Gulf, come right up the east coast and then go out into the open Atlantic over Cape Hatteras. So the next 6 to 12 hours, we're talking water temperatures in the mid to low 80s. Definitely warm enough to support a storm becoming a hurricane. From there, water temperatures are going to drop. Once it gets to about the latitude of Ocean City, Maryland, and then towards Delaware and southern New Jersey, that's when we start to see the numbers drop off more into the mid and even lower 70s, not warm enough to support a strengthening system. So even as waters are above average temperature-wise off the coast of Long Island, New England, there's still likely going to be at least some weakening prior to landfall. So is this going to be a major hurricane at landfall? I really don't think that's in the cards. Is this even going to be a hurricane at landfall? Maybe a borderline Cat 1. I think that's the most likely scenario at this point in time. Something in the 65 to 85 mile per hour wind range at landfall. Still plenty strong enough to cause a whole lot of issues. Let's go through that latest cone of concern forecast from the Hurricane Center. Zooming in, timing-wise, 2 a.m. tomorrow morning. This is likely peaking in intensity. There's a Category 1 storm by 2 a.m. Sunday off to the east of New Jersey. Now, the times are getting muddled here on our cone because this is going to very much slow down as it moves its way onshore. The Hurricane Center says right around Long Island as a tropical storm, moving onshore from there. But note, again, those times are all bundled up because basically stalls, slows to a crawl, moves slowly eastward. We're talking even into 2 a.m. Tuesday. This is still moving through parts of New Hampshire. So, with that in mind, I think the biggest threat from Henri, and this is often the case with landfalling tropical systems in the Northeast, is for rainfall, flooding rainfall. I want to show you this model, our in-house storm tracker model, showing you the rain totals. That bullseye there near Utica and Albany, I don't have it pixel queried, but that's 11 inches of rainfall on our model. Way away from where we're talking about the hurricane and tropical storm force warnings. As this slows down, it's going to be a prolific rainmaker. Somebody's going to get absolutely soaked. Many of these spots already waterlogged from recent rainfalls, so it's not going to take much to get flash flooding going. I think a broad 2 to 6 inches, as most models are showing, plenty to do that. So flooding is going to be a big and widespread issue here, not just for the coastal areas, but much of upstate New York, much of New England, even parts of Pennsylvania and northern New Jersey under the threat for flooding rainfall. Second biggest concern, in my opinion, is the winds and the threat for power outages. So no not many spots are going to see tropical storm or even hurricane force winds. The hurricane force wind field will be very, very small if this is still even a hurricane as it comes on shore. In fact, the highest percentages from the Hurricane Center on Long Island, about 20% in their latest update, a 20% chance to see sustained winds 74 miles per hour or greater. I think there'll be a wider tropical storm force wind shield, or field rather. But, bottom line, the power grid in these areas aren't really built to sustain winds of this force. We think of tropical storms down here in Florida. We don't worry too much because our power grid is built much more strong. Our structure's built strongly. And also, the trees. There's a whole lot of trees in these areas. Some dense forest out there. We're talking those big, tall oak trees, maple trees, and they're going to be on saturated grounds. A lot of trees coming down, a lot of trees down on power lines. That is going to lead to some power outages. Those of you, especially in the tropical storm and hurricane watch and warning areas, should be preparing for the potential of multi-day power outages, 3 to 5 days at least. I think that's in the realm of possibility. You got to stock up those hurricane kits. Make sure you're ready to be without power for at least a couple of days. Again, I don't think we're talking terribly strong winds here, but this is our same storm tracker model showing you wind gusts already by 4 a.m. tomorrow morning on Long Island in the 40 to 50 mile per hour range, 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts on Long Island, coastal New England, Rhode Island, Connecticut, into parts of Cape Cod. The exact track this takes will determine exactly who sees the worst winds, but again, I do think we're talking that Long Island to Cape Cod area. That's where the tropical storm force sustained winds are almost guaranteed at this point, and we could see gusts into hurricane strength. Winds will die down as this moves inland and weakens, but still a wide area of 20-25 mile per hour winds. With all that rain coming down, we could still be talking trees toppling into Monday from this. Long period of onshore winds too, and we're at the full moon tomorrow into Monday. So with that, tides are already running high, and storm surge is going to be a problem. Storm surge watches and warnings in effect. There's your storm surge warning. Much of Long Island along the coast through Connecticut, Rhode Island, into Cape Cod, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard. 3 to 5 foot water level rises on top of the normal tidal rise too is going to lead to some inundation, I think, at high tide in particular. Something that is definitely going to be an issue out there as well. So again, we're talking the full range of impacts from a landfalling tropical system. That storm surge threat in particular will be determined on the exact track, the exact path this takes onshore. If it goes a little more to the east, say it comes onshore in Rhode Island, that means offshore winds on the storm's western side for Long Island, for Connecticut. Less of a storm surge threat. It increases for Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard. If this goes in, say around the New York City area, which some models say is a possibility. Now we're talking the entire swath of land here. Sees onshore winds for hours and end. Not to mention the waters being piled up here and not able to escape at high tide, causing more issues. So again, the exact path it takes, that'll determine where exact the highest storm surge threat is. But as I don't think we're talking, a huge wind maker, the storm surge threat, not as high as it perhaps could be in other storms. I'll leave you with this. Because, of course, here in Florida, this won't be impacting us, Henri, whatsoever. What we're tracking, actually, is Saharan dust working into our skies. That Saharan dust is going to keep a lid on things for further developments across the Caribbean into the central Atlantic, going through the weekend into next week. In fact, outside of that little swirl I showed you that would go into the open Atlantic, there's no areas of concern at this point in time, certainly not for Florida. So good news there. We'll be tracking Henri closely as it approaches New England here at ABC7, so stay tuned for updates. I'll have another edition of Tropics Talk for you coming up tomorrow morning. Until then, I'm meteorologist Jim Dickey. Have a good day.